And so I'm going to talk about this idea today. And this idea is pretty simple, of the idea of relaunching. We've heard incredible content today. We talked about responding. We talked about rebuilding. I'm going to talk to you about relaunching. And so before we do that, I want to show a quick picture of my family. And so my wife, Brittany, and as you can see, my oldest is Benton. That's Adeline. Piper is the little one right there in the middle, not looking at the camera. And then the oldest one up there is Carter, who looks like he's ready to hit his older brother. And I've got two redheads and two brunettes. And so often called around our house, where's the redheads and where's the brunettes running around? All right. So so sometimes they'll have names, but in the neighborhood, that's what they are. Right. And so but I'm excited today because as we talk about relaunching, I don't think you can really talk much about relaunching. I don't think you can talk about relaunching your business or your family or mobilizing anything well without relaunching yourself first. So today I really want to hit on this idea of before you relaunch anything, it's always about relaunching me. So if you're going to relaunch an organization, you want to rebuild your family, it doesn't matter what it is, it always starts with you. Can I get an amen? So it's about relaunching yourself first. So we're going to talk about this. But there's a story I've read recently, and maybe you guys have heard it, but it was from the 1968 Olympics. It was the marathon runner, John Akhwari. Raise your hand if you've heard this story before. Well, John Akhwari was a runner from Tanzania. And John Akhwari is now running in this marathon race. They're running in the 1968 Olympics. We're in Mexico City. So he travels, he comes to run this race. And John Akhwari gets there. And then early on in this marathon race, he falls down and has an injury. He messes his knee up. He's down for a long time. Everybody, of course, continues to run. Not only did he jack his knee up, when John fell as well, he dislocated his shoulder. And here's this precious man who had probably built his life and built all these past years of running and preparing himself for the adventure that he was about to step into. Now, here's John, and he's running. And a lot of people don't know this part of the story, and you can YouTube it and you can learn more about it. But as John was running in this race, he ends up being not just behind, he ends up being so far behind that by the time he continues to run, when he gets back into the arena was almost empty. People had forgotten that this man was still running the race. The runner, the first place winner, was 1 hour and 5 minutes before him in this marathon race in the Olympics. You know about that? That would be a long span of time for this Olympic run that they were doing. He was so far behind that not only was he finished 1 hour and 5 minutes behind, he actually already had the medal ceremony. And so here comes John. John runs into the arena. He makes himself in. There's basically no one around. There is a man there who is watching this man just limp around the last lap of this race. And then John, of course, he just stumbles and he finishes the race. And there was a man there, and he was actually a journalist. And this man's name was Bud Greenspan. And Bud went over to this man who was physically depleted, who could barely walk, shoulder was injured, he's too far behind. And he said, John, why did you do this? Why did you continue to run this race? And here's was John's response. My country did not send me 5,000 miles to start the race. They sent me here to finish the race. And I think for any of us in this place today, we have to learn something. If you're going to relaunch, it's not about relaunching to start. It's not about relaunching to continue. It is about relaunching to finish. And I think if we want to see a city impact, we got to have a bunch of finishers that are ready to say, you know what? Doesn't matter how difficult, doesn't matter what it looks like. I'm going to finish the race that God has called me to do in my life. Here's the beauty of it. It's not going to look like previous speakers. It's not going to look like Martin. It's not going to look like anybody else in the crowd. God's called you to run a race. And guess what? Your race at the end of the day is one thing only, and that's what you're called to do, and it's to give it all for him anyways. So whatever race I am running, he gets the glory for it. It doesn't matter if you got a microphone, doesn't matter if you're holding a door, doesn't matter if you're a CEO of a company, doesn't matter if you're a front desk worker, it doesn't matter. Whatever race God has called me to it, I'm going to maximize it for his glory in everything that I do. So today, we're going to talk about what it looks like to relaunch yourself well. And so if we talked a lot about 2020, and we all know that 2020 has caused a lot of pain for us. It's caused a lot of, not only was it a lot of pain, not it was a lot of just financial decisions. 2020 also for a lot of us, it messed us up emotionally. And we talked about that with Erica at the very beginning. Like we know what this looks like, and we know the damage that it caused for all of us. But to relaunch yourself well, it all starts with this one thing. If you're going to relaunch yourself well, it all comes down to hard work. My pastor says it like this, and I am going to give him credit for it. My senior pastor, his name is Pastor Chris, and he says it like this: you can't have $1 million dream with a $100 work ethic. Oh, that hit home for some people in here, all right? You can't have $1 million dream with a $100 work ethic. If you want to relaunch yourself well, it's going to take some work. And I know Mark was talking about how you guys relaunched as a church. I'm going to kind of create a parallel for all of us for you to relaunch yourself well, but also kind of just give you 4 simple words that if you're going to relaunch your company well and to execute it well, what that'll look like. Thomas Edison actually said this. He said, we often miss opportunity because it's dressed in overalls and looks like work. I think sometimes we love the idea of easy and we like success. And often people would come to our church and they walk in and they see excellence and they see a building and they see whatever this is. And they think, well, my goodness, you guys just snapped your fingers and here you are. And I'm like, no, you don't know what it was like in 8 summers with one person unloading a trailer when you're sweating and you're doing multiple services. And guess what? We would do 12 services if one more person came to know Christ. It doesn't matter to us. We're called to work. But a lot of people think that success is just overnight. That takes a grit and it takes a determination. And I'm going to talk to us today about what this looks like for all of us to relaunch well. But here in this room, one thing I love is that we get to keep on improving. 2020 showed us that everyone changes, but not everyone improves. And we saw a lot of companies that just dismantled. We saw a lot of companies that were just disengaged. We saw a lot of families fall apart. Well, the reason for that is people didn't take the opportunity to improve. And so I hope you take today as an opportunity for all of us to improve. I don't know about you guys, but when it comes to hard work, I think one thing is amazing is we live here in Title Town. Let's not forget that even with a couple losses, we are still Title Town, everybody. People will not forget that what we do around here is we win championships, okay? And so in a city like this, have you ever noticed that at the end of the season, doesn't matter what the season looked like, doesn't matter if it was one loss, it doesn't matter what it was like, you get to that last interview on TV. Have you ever noticed? No one's ever sad on that interview. No one's ever, if they're crying, it's happy tears. Why? They're about to get a break from Coach Saban yelling at them. And they're right, Donnie. Come on, they're ready for that break. But guess what? At the end of those interviews, no one talks about how hard they had to work. They get to celebrate. So before you celebrate, it's going to take the work ethic. So I'm going to give you 4 very simple things. If you want to relaunch yourself well, I'm going to give you 4 things to write down, okay? 4 things, and each one of those is going to have a question below that to help you reflect on them. So for us to relaunch ourselves well, number 1 is this. You got to fight the enemy of average. We live in a society that loves to be average. We're content being average. I don't know about you, but I'm going to fight the enemy of average. I don't want to be average. I don't want to fit into the status quo. I want everything in my life to go against average. I want when people look at my life, when they look at my family, when they look at my marriage. Listen, I'm around a lot of young people. I don't want anybody to look at my life and think, well, that's just, he's okay. I want people to look at my life and be like, I want what he has. He don't have it all together, but that man's striving to constantly improve. The key to moving forward in any area of your life is not settling for average. Nick Saban has a quote says it like this: high achievers don't like mediocre people, and mediocre people don't like high achievers. Yeah, let's all just tweet that today. All right. We'll give Jason Helper credit for that. All right. Not Coach Saban. But in my life, I'm a servant of Christ, but I also work at a church. So I want you to hear this today. My mindset is simple. I don't serve an average God, so I will not settle to be an average leader. So there's actually some of our team here today. And one thing that we love to talk a lot about when it comes to this idea of not settling for average is the environments we get to create, the culture we get to embody. Because guess what? As the highest level leader, as the highest level leaders of our church, the direction of our team goes the direction of our church. So if we're not ready to accept the fact that, guess what? God is not average, so we can't be average. When we begin to lead out of that mentality, our campus and our church follows that mentality. So we get an opportunity, every one of us, to follow this mindset. We also say things like this: we don't just go the extra mile, we crave it. Jesus talks about going the extra mile. We don't say, well, I guess, you know what? I guess we'll go the extra mile. Here we go again. No. We say, you know what? Let's button that jacket up. We get to go the extra mile in everything that we do. So for any of you, whenever we face this opposition, like we've talked about today, I sign up for the challenge and say, you know what? I crave to go this extra mile. Whatever this is going to look like in our city, if it's one more prison that we get to be a part of, if it's one more person we get to reach, let's crave to go the extra mile. Why? Because we're not going to settle for average. How do you relaunch yourself well? Don't settle for average. And one thing our team did a number of years ago, and I don't know if there's some fitness people in here today, but we did something called a Tough Mudder. Has anybody ever heard of a Tough Mudder before? All right, Tough Mudder, the closest thing here would be TrueVine. So Colin, we would love to talk to you after about how to sign up for TrueVine and be a part of that. But a Tough Mudder is an obstacle course where you actually run either like a 5-mile race or you do a half marathon, you run 13 miles. So our team was talking about what's a challenge, what's something fun we could do. And they were all like, you know what, like, let's go for a jog, let's go start going for jogs. And I was like, yeah, jogs. I love it. I love it. And they were like, let's all get in shape together. I was like, I love it. I love it. Let's get in shape together. And they were like, you know what, let's all run like 5 miles together. And I was like, I love it. I mean, this is great. We're getting somewhere. So I come into the office the next day. I said, it hit me. We're going to do a Tough Mudder together. So I sent them a video and I said, this is what the Tough Mudder is going to be. We're going to run about 13 miles together. And a lot of them just, their eyes lit up. And I was like, I think we're going to crawl through mud together. Like, we're going to sweat together. We're probably going to cry a little bit together. Not me, you guys are. And we're going to do this race together. So we get to the Tough Mudder. And not only were we just going to run this race to do this, we were not just going to be the people that just did the race and we finished it. We had this mentality as a team. Let's make this awesome. We brought so much life into where we were that the guy that was running the Tough Mudder race walked up to one of our team members and said, I'll hire you right now to be a part of this. Because everywhere they went, they were high-fiving people. They were chanting. They were rallying everybody around us ready to run this Tough Mudder. Well, the beauty of it was we get to the end of the race. Now just let me openly repent for what I'm about to say because we lied, okay? And so I'm a pastor, shouldn't do that, but it kind of just happened in the heat of competitiveness, okay? Now we're running this Tough Mudder, and while we're running this race, there was one particular obstacle that I really wanted our team to be a part of. And when you run this obstacle, you actually, it's probably about, let's say 10 yards of mud, and they put these hay bales ever so often a part of this. And what you have to do is you have to run through the mud, jump over the hay bales. But the kicker is there's these wires hanging down. And what these wires are connected to is electricity. So you run through this race, all right, this kind of like a military thing, you're running through this race and this thing would shock you as you make it through. Not difficult enough that you're going to go to the hospital, but it's going to sting a little bit, okay? So we run through the race and I'm like, guys, follow my lead. We're not going to be average. We're not just going to run this. We're going to do that over there. So we cut across it. They lined up. And about that time, we're all standing there. And I'm ready. I've been hyping the team up for 5 minutes. We're all going to go through this one obstacle. And they're like, you lead the charge. And I was like, no, leaders go last. You guys lead the charge. It's like, so about that time, I'm watching my friend, and all of a sudden he starts running through it. It zaps his neck. He falls in the mud. And I'm like, this was a terrible idea. All right. We're going to relaunch ourselves backwards is what we're doing here today. And about that time, we run through the race. And at the end of it, you know what I noticed about our team? We went from a team to a family. We were covered in mud. I mean, our shoes it was extra weight. Everything about that day, we became less of just a team accomplishing something to more about a family ready to do whatever it takes. And it was a moment that you looked around the room and you looked around, all of us are changing. We're all getting, it's that adrenaline moment. And the moment we became a family was the moment everybody realized, I've got your back. So to relaunch yourself well, you can't accept the idea of being average, but you've also got to know, I'm not just average with myself. I'm accountable to the whole team. So the parallel of that is for you to relaunch yourself well, right? We're not going to accept being average. I'm going to refuse to be average. But when it comes to your company, if you want to execute that, that comes with vision. You can't execute anything. You can't relaunch anything without vision. The Bible tells us without vision, the people perish. We have to have vision in everything that we do. So a lot of people were coming to our pastor saying, hey, 2020 is happening. Everybody's shutting down. What are you going to do? He's like, first off, we're going to pray and God's going to give us vision. So what we did is, yeah, we had to close our doors for a period of time. But guess what? We did not just close the church. We elevated our outreach. So when everybody else was saying, we don't know what to do, you know what we started doing? Knocking on doors, social distancing. Hey, how can we help you? Why? It was a vision opportunity for us. How do we know that it was a God moment? I was sitting at the church office one day, and a lady walks in. She hands me an envelope, and she says, listen, I just saw on social media what you guys are doing. And she said, I just want to give this check and say, can you continue to pour into the city of Tuscaloosa? And it was just an offering. She said, hey, here's X amount of money. Can you just keep serving people? People are hurting. Can you keep helping them? I can't do it. I don't know them. I don't have all the opportunity, but can you do it? Why? Because we were craving the extra mile in everything that we did. So we're going to fight the enemy of the average. Here's the question I want you to write down. It's very simple. What area of my life have I allowed to become average? That's going to be different for all of us. All right. So there's your Q&A content right there. What area of my life have I allowed to become average? So to fight the enemy of average is making up our mind to not stay there. Number 2 is this. If we're going to relaunch ourselves well, I've got to evaluate my relationships. Evaluate my relationships. You're only as strong as the people around you. Why do I love today? Because not only do I get to hang out with all of you amazing people, but one of my very good friends is Jason Helper, and that has gotten a lot of shout outs, too many shout outs, to be honest. And I love Jason. Half the reason I'm here is he's actually a member of our church, is to make sure he's saved outside the building. And so that's a good thing to know. He's really loves Jesus everywhere he goes. And he actually said he would Venmo me $20 if I gave him a shout out. So there you go, Jason. And don't you forget that, okay? But the speed and direction of our leadership life is always directly tied to our relationships. And so there's an interview done with Dr. Henry Cloud, and many of you guys have probably heard him. He's a leadership expert. That's where he's known, but he's also has an expertise in psychology. And one time he was asked this question: what creates emotional security in people? So I want you to think about this. What creates emotional security in people? And his answer was this: their relational connectedness. So I think to relaunch yourself well, I've got to evaluate my friendships, my relationships. But on the flip side of that, I've also got to know, as a leader, am I creating an environment of healthy relationships? People only normally follow your ability of connectedness based upon their leaders' connectedness. So one thing we talk about with our campus staff is this: it doesn't matter how many people show up on a Sunday. I'm not interested in that. I want to know 2 numbers at the end of the day on a Sunday. And let me just say right here at the beginning, churches can get a bad reputation for talking about numbers. We talk numbers. And if you look at the Gospels and you read the book of Acts, it talks about numbers. I don't think it's just a random fact that the authors of Scripture were looking at the Bible and talking about they would feed an X amount of people, or when they would preach, this many people got saved. Or the Bible talks about numbers, and we talk about as a staff, hey, we'll talk about numbers, because it's not about how many people are sitting in seats. It's about how many people gave their life to Christ. It's about how many marriages are restored. It's about how many marriages now are going to be free, how many addictions are broken, how many more prisons we can serve in. We're going to talk about numbers. Why? Because people matter. And if I look at every single chair, guess what I'm looking at? I'm looking at a chair, but I'm not looking at an empty chair. I'm looking at, that's a missed opportunity. So everything I look at a chair, that's the opportunity for us to share the gospel. That's where one more person is going to find their gifting, their calling. I'm looking at a father who could be restored to make a difference in his family. And it all comes back to relationships. So for us, we're looking at number 1 is how many people give their life to Christ. The second thing is this: when I talk to the team, how many people did you talk to today? Now, I'm not talking about talk to, I'm talking about, did you get their name? Or because that means there's a follow-up this week of how many coffees are you going to have? How many stories are you going to hear? And we pride ourselves on, as leaders, to make sure in our life, it's not going to be about us. It's going to be about how many people do we connect with? How many people did we love? And so to relaunch ourselves, we got to look at our relationships. I would say it like this for anybody who's a leader in the room: does somebody really know what's going on in your life? I got back actually yesterday from a trip with a friend. He's 35 years old. He's president of a construction company. He's super young. I mean, just a vibrant young guy. And he started as an internship in this company, and he began to work himself up to now he's president of it. It's a company here in the state of Alabama. And he called me about 2 weeks ago, maybe a month ago, and he said, hey, I want to go on a trip, and I would love for you to join me. He said, I'm inviting some guys in my life that have played a pivotal part of my leadership and my spiritual development to go on this trip with me so that we can just build our relationship together. I said, man, like, I think that's wise. I think it'd be fun. So we go on a quick trip together. We left Monday afternoon and we got back last night. And I noticed something on this trip, that we were sitting around this little fire pit and we're having conversations. And it wasn't just about him. It was, we all began asking our own questions and to one another. And all of a sudden it was, hey, what thing is concerning you? What thing is holding you back about your future? Hey, what's one area of your life that you need to work on? And we, in this 15, 20-minute talk, we're just hanging out. We had a dinner together. And my friend looked at all of us and says this, he goes, when you guys look at my life, what's one thing I need to change? And to me, that took courage, that took strength, that took a boldness, because he was trusting the people around him to tell him the truth. And he said, hey, if you guys will tell me that, can I tell y'all one thing that you need to work on just from what I observe that I think you could work on in your life? Can I tell you something? I left that conversation. I got back to Tuscaloosa last night. I think I felt pretty good about the fact that I've surrounded myself with some right friendships. So when was the last time somebody asked you some tough questions? And also this, when was the last time you called someone and you asked them some questions as well? The Bible talks about how we all need a Paul, we all need a Timothy, and we all need a Barnabas. You know what that means? I've got to have somebody above me I call. I got to have somebody that can look at me and say, hey, Pastor, you know what? There's some things you need to work on. I want to look at your schedule. You need to be mentored. I need to have a Barnabas in my life that's a friendship, that's a Jason I can call, that we can go get some food together and we can iron sharpens iron. We can work on some relationships together if we're going to relaunch well. But I've also got to have a Timothy. I've got to have some people I'm mentoring as well. So I want to challenge everybody in here. If you don't have it in your relationship life, find a Paul, somebody that you can look up to. Find a Barnabas, somebody you can do life with, and then find a Timothy, somebody you could pour into. And if you don't have that, go to your church, find your pastor. If you don't have one, go find a ministry, something you could plug into and say, listen, I've got something inside of me that I need to depart into somebody else. And they're going to open the doors for you. So here's our question. What relationships in my life do I need to increase? What relationships in my life do I need to increase? Let me also give a follow-up to that as well. And that is, what relationships in your life do you need to separate? If you're going to relaunch yourself well, you've got to step into some relationships, but probably in most of our life, there's probably some relationships we need to step away from as well. So when I look at my life, I think, you know what relationships are going to push me forward and what relationships are holding me back? And that's all of us. So if you're going to relaunch well, you're going to relaunch your life well, you've got to look at your relationships. So I talked about what that looks like in a parallel context for your family, your business, whatever it may look like. So we talked about number one would be vision. Number two would be your friendships. You're only going to move at the speed and the direction of the relationships in your life. Number three is this. If you're going to relaunch yourself well, be a servant leader. Be a servant leader. I don't think we even need to preach on it. I don't think we need to talk about it a whole lot in this conversation, but if you're going to relaunch yourself well, you've got to look at the mirror and realize, especially if you're the leader, you're not just called to lead with vision, you're also called to serve everybody else. There's a book called Leaders Eat Last. It's this mindset of, in every environment you're in, be the greatest servant of all. And I've heard a pastor say it like this: if you're too big to serve, then you are too small to lead. If you are too big to serve, then you are too small to lead. A servant leader is not something you sign up to do. It's a hard adjustment that has to take place in your life. If I look at my own life, I think there's something that I would grow in. I'm 35 years old. I graduated from the University of Alabama in fall of 2010. So I graduated in December. That took some wisdom in my life because I knew if I did this well, I could squeeze in one more football season. Okay, so I did my journey well. And right after I was going through my college journey, I didn't grow up in church. And I think a lot of people that look at people on stage, especially pastors or ministers, they think that we just have it all together and we came up out of the womb and we just had a Bible in our hands and everything in our life is perfect. That's not true, okay? And we're on a journey just like everybody else. But I gave my life to Christ as a freshman in college. Didn't really grow up in church. As a young guy, had a great family, grew up in Birmingham. father passed away when I was 17 years old from lung cancer, and it just took me down a spiral of bad decisions and searching and looking for fulfillment. Honestly, I remember a guy showed up to my house, and he handed me a letter. And I had known this guy well, and when he showed up at the door, it kind of meant something to me, because when he showed up, when he was in middle school, both of his parents passed away in a plane crash. So when he showed up to my house, something clicked in me. This guy understands my pain. And he handed me a letter. And if you ever looked, kind of got a letter, or maybe you get an email, and when you glance at it, you don't have to read the whole thing. It's almost like certain words will jump off the page at you. And I remember looking at the page, and what jumped off the page at me was turn to God. And I remember folding it back up and I handed it back to him. I said, I'm glad you're here, but I'm not doing that. Kind of went on a journey, freshman year of college, exhausted from partying, doing all the stuff. I was searching, couldn't find fulfillment. I was in a fraternity to everybody else around me. Life was good. I was empty. I was hollow. Everything about my life, if somebody would have taken the time to look me in the eyes and to say, how are you doing? Tears would have came flowing out. Anybody ever been there before? Like, I just remember just being in that place of just desperation. From 7th grade to my freshman year of college, nobody had ever invited me to church. 7th grade, freshman year of college. And we live in Alabama. This is not the Bible Belt. This is the belt buckle. Like, we're in the middle of this bad boy. And I get invited to church. And listen, I get invited to church. And I don't know if you've ever been to church. They do these altar calls, and everybody's coming forward. And people come to the front, and they're like cheering. There's people with their hands lifted. And you look over, and there's me, and I'm on my knees. And it's not tears, it's snot. It's everything. Everything's coming out of my face. I mean, just, I don't know what to do. And they're like, say a prayer. And I'm like, God, if you're there, it's like, I don't know what to say or what to do. But in one moment, my life changed. But here was the craziest part. Not only did my life change because of salvation, but guess what? My heart changed from me craving acceptance from everybody to everywhere I went, I wanted to uplift everybody. So I wrote this down, and I think it's good for all of us that when you become a servant leader, you enjoy thank yous, but you're not fueled from it. Let me say it like this. My affirmation comes from God. So we say this when it comes to marriage. My wife makes me happy. Or Jesus makes me happy. My wife just can make me happier. But if I go to her to look for acceptance and to look for joy, it ain't going to work out. So my mindset is always this. Every environment I'm in, can I just be a servant leader to everybody else? Can we make it a mindset? Listen, when it comes to your family, when it comes to your coworkers, every environment you're in, be a servant leader. Just be a servant leader. How do you relaunch yourself well? Lower yourself and lift everybody else up. Listen, let's just say it real quick. If you look at the life of Jesus, what did Jesus say? I came to serve, not to be served. If you're talking about the Son of God, the only one who ever existed that we all should have served in that moment, guess what? He came and said, I'm just here to serve everybody else. I'm just going to elevate every room that I'm in. Can I just say, if you work in a company or whatever organization you're a part of, what would it look like if every morning you walked in thinking, well, man, I hope my boss talks to me today. If you said, you know what? He's busy. I don't need his affirmation. He gave me the job. That means he probably trusts me to do the job. So you know what? I'm going to go uplift every cubicle, every office. I'm going to get Krispy Kreme donuts. I saw the hot light was on. That's a sign from God. I'm going to get some donuts. I'm going to step into the workplace. I'm going to put some donuts on that conference room table, and I'm going to elevate everybody else around me. And guess what? I'm not even going to put on the sticky note, enjoy the donut. This is from Bubba, office 212. I'm just putting donuts out there, and if they enjoy it, they enjoy it. Let's just uplift, and let's not care who gets the credit. Let's just be servant leaders everywhere we go. So here's a question for you. Are you ready? Am I daily looking for ways to serve others? That's the question. If you're going to relaunch yourself well, if you're going to relaunch your company well, daily look for ways to serve others. So we talked about a parallel. How do you execute it? You got to have vision. You got to have friendships. You got to have humility. I think 2020 exposed everybody. We are not know-it-alls. It did. Let's just humble ourselves. All right, so here's number 4. Going to relaunch yourself well. Terrible grammar, okay? But make every day the good old days. Have you ever heard somebody talk about their life and they say, well, hey, I'll tell you what, back then, Those were come on, one more time. That just felt right. Back then, that was can I just confess something? I don't like that term. Because I don't want to live my life looking in the rearview mirror thinking that was good. I think as a leader, I have to make up the decision for my life, my family, those around me, everything that I do to make today the good old days. John Maxwell talks about this often, and he actually mentors our pastor. And so we get to hear him often. We kind of get to hear different teachings and different thoughts and processes from our pastor that he kind of gets to repeat things he's learning from him. And he said there's something magnificent about John Maxwell that every environment he's in, doesn't matter how big, doesn't matter if it's thousands of people he's speaking to, it doesn't matter if it's 2 or 3 people he's with, he makes every single thing the good old days. I want to remind all of ourselves, everybody here today, myself included in this, today we have a choice. I'm going to get through today or I'm going to maximize today. I want to maximize today in everything that I do. And Ephesians even tells us that. It's to take advantage of every opportunity that we've been given. The days are evil. Know what Paul was saying then? Hey, the days are evil, but guess what? I still got today. So if it's going to come to an end, if life is short, if it is a vapor, it is a mist, to relaunch myself in anything that I do, I'm just going to make today the good old days. So here's my final question for you, and that is this. Do I talk more about what I have done or what I'm going to do? If you're going to relaunch well, let's stop talking about all the things we once did well. Come on, let's put some weight on the shoulders. Let's get in the right relationships, and let's say, you know what? Moving forward, here's all the things that God's put in my heart. Here's a vision that is inside of me. And here's what I love about today is this. What I love about today, and we've had some amazing communicators, and I'll be honest, I'm really thankful for the break because I didn't want to follow up directly after Bishop when he finished, and so that kind of gave me a little buffer that maybe you guys forgot how good he was for a second. But stepping into this, you know what I kept thinking about? What if next year it's double? Because I look, if what you could really put on my bio is this: I love God, I love my family, and I love my city. Simple enough. I love God, I love my family, I love my city. To the point of this, whenever somebody joins our church, we do a membership class. This is how practical I would go with this. And if we're sitting there, we get a few minutes that we talk with them, and we always say, listen, we're not just a church in Tuscaloosa. That's just not who we are. We're Christians that are called to serve our city. I think we put too much pressure on ourselves to feel like we got to change a city. I can't change a city. I can serve it. So to serve a city means this. When I go downtown and I go get coffee or I go hang out with my friends or we go walk around or we're on campus, if there's a piece of trash on the ground, guess what? That's not the city's trash. That's my trash. Why? This is my city. I'm called to serve my city. I'm called to make today the good old days. I'm called today to make everything that I'm called to, everything that I get to do to make it an impact, to make the city greater, to make my family stronger, and to give God all the glory. So I want to end you with this, and that is the four parallels to make it simple. And it was this, and that is vision. So if you're going to relaunch yourself and you relaunch your business or anything in your life, you're going to execute it well. It's going to take vision. It's going to take relationships. It's going to take humility. And here's the last one. You got to have some fun, everybody. You got to have fun. You got to have fun. And here's what I'll say, and I'll bring Martin up. And I don't know what I think they're doing a panel or something after this, and so it's going to be great. And Jason's got a 45-minute presentation as well. And so, but I want to say this for everybody, and that is, it doesn't matter your age. Doesn't matter your age. Doesn't matter your experience. Life is hard, and we have a cultural phrase that I'm going to end with. Doesn't matter how hard life is. Doesn't matter how heavy life can be. Doesn't matter how much money you have in the bank accounts. Doesn't matter how stressed you are. Doesn't matter times you want to get out of bed. Every day you get to wake up with two things: breath in your lungs and a decision. A decision is this: no matter how hard life can be, I can still have fun. So thank you guys so much for letting me be a part of today.